Good morning, everyone. Thank you for coming this early to attend this exciting event. We are excited about the Tropical Soybean for Development workshop. This workshop has been organized by the Soybean Innovation Lab, which is one of our research programs that have been awarded last year to the University of Illinois, and the director of lab, Dr. Peter Goldsmith, with us here today. And if you want to learn more about the Soybean Innovation Lab or more about soybean, tropical soybean, you can visit the website soybeaninnovationlab.illinois.edu or follow their Twitter handle @tropicalsoylab. And as Pete told me, the Twitter does not provide dating advice. It is more about soybean and science. So it is a good portal for this kind of information. Today's event focuses on the need of soybean practitioner to become successful developer for soybean. And as we all know, soybean is not a native crop for Africa. Practitioner farmers operating in the tropics. Soybean is commercial, non-stable crop that is foreign to current agriculture portfolios in a small and medium holders. And during this workshop, we will learn more about tropical soybean for development, about some of the challenges, and about the problems and potential solution for them. Our first speaker is Dr. Rob Bertram, Chief Scientist, Bureau of Food Security at USAID. Please join us. Welcome, Dr. Bertram.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you, Ahmed. Okay, so I'm all set. And I'd like to begin by saying that besides that it's a pleasure to be here, that I really have, what I'm going to say this morning, I got a lot of good support and ideas over the last year from Dr. Goldsmith, other colleagues in the lab, and from Dr. Kablan. And I have a number of slides that I cribbed from Pete. And I said to Pete, I feel funny, showing your slides. And he said, no, that's okay. You're supposed to be the integrator here this morning. So I hope that my humility will shine through the fact that I'm using all these other people's work. So, but I want to, more seriously, I want to start out quickly, about 20 minutes, I think. I want to start out quickly with some context of why, what's the context around this, the larger efforts that we're involved in Feed the Future. And then I think move on to the new ground of the Soybean Innovation Lab and why we're so excited about it. It's really a 21st century agricultural development program in many ways, and I hope that I can flag some of those for you. So this slide, if you look at that, there's nothing particularly new in terms of insights. In fact, I could have been standing here 10 years ago and shown you all these same points, and the world was doing very little. In fact, the world was busy disinvesting in agricultural development during that period, even though we knew this. And we had an evidence base to show what a good investment agricultural R&D is, and it still didn't change the situation in terms of the agriculture and food being on the back burner of the development agenda. So I think everybody by now knows what happened in 2007, 2008. Food once again became front page news. We saw civil unrest, disorder in maybe up to 30 countries. There was a lot of debate about what was causing this. Was it drought? Was it biofuels increasing demand? Was it policies around low stocks? And probably all of these were factors, but in a relatively small way. What we found instead is that we were in a new era of higher prices. This is not a spike. I mean, the prices have fluctuated still, but they're still well over what they had been in the early part of the last decade and in prior years. And we think there are two major factors. One is the demand shift that's associated with income growth, and particularly towards feed-intensive foods, so your animal source foods in particular, as incomes rise. So demand was racing ahead of population growth. But the second thing, which I think was less obvious to people, was the point that Ken Kassman likes to make, that what we've had for the last 40 or so years is linear growth in our main commodities. So these are rice, wheat, and maize. In other words, the same increment year on year. But what that means is that what was almost a 3% growth rate in the 1960s is now just over 1%. And that declining rate of productivity growth undercuts a lot of the kinds of development gains that we saw in the early days of the Green Revolution in terms of keeping prices low. In fact, making prices, real prices, lower so that poor people had more money in their pockets every day. Because if you're spending 70% of your money on food, which is not uncommon, if food prices go down in a real sense, your disposable income increases. If the opposite occurs, which is what's happened in recent years, you get a big pinch, which is why we saw these riots break out as people saw their gains eroding rapidly. Now, the good news is that the way to deal with this is through R&D. In other words, we can up the curve there. We can push that curve up. And I would put forward to you that soy is a great case in point. Soy is a crop which has enjoyed continuing strong R&D. And I believe that the growth rate, Pete, you correct me if I'm wrong, is something over 2% with soy. So I mean, you can see very real differences associated with how much the global community is willing to invest in these critical food commodities. So just sort of summing up, this was a slide from Mark Rosegrant at IFPRI. We have these challenges, which we've also already mentioned there at the top, that can be driving the food price situation. We have critical natural resource challenges, and we have this issue of reinvesting in R&D, reversing years of disinvestment, and I think very importantly to Feed the Future and to the Soybean Innovation Lab is linking these changes, these investments in R&D and capacity building allied to that to on-the-ground impact and helping really show that we can make that change and justify our way forward. So beginning in 2009, when he took office, the president launched the Feed the Future initiative as part of the G8. Feed the Future is an all-of-government effort, so USDA, Millennium Challenge Corporation, State Department, Peace Corps are all partners with us. And we are the $3 billion, that was for 3 years, $1 billion or so a year, piece of a $22.5 billion G8 commitment that was made in L'Aquila in Italy. I wanted to flag two of these. One of them I have highlighted, three, because that's the R&D piece that I think is right at the heart of the work of the lab. But also take your attention to number 6, which is about improved access to food and nutrition services. So this is the thrust of Feed the Future that is as much about nutrition and nutrition enhancement as it is about growth, traditional growth from agricultural development. I want to say a little bit on the how. This is the what Feed the Future does. The how, a few points, country-led. That means if our partner countries don't think it's a priority and they're not investing in it, we probably shouldn't either. A second point is that we have 3 cross-cutting areas. One is gender, which again, critically important to the nutrition outcomes, but also as women are economic agents in the agricultural development process and leaders of all, throughout the set of expertises that are required. And then this approach on value chains, which is also very much the central focus for most of our mission programs overseas. And we have 19 focus missions. 12 of those are in sub-Saharan Africa. Finally, on this, the metrics for Feed the Future were very high-level objectives, and it's very interesting because one is poverty reduction, which maybe isn't a surprise for those of us in ag research. The other is reduction in stunting in children under 2, which is an enormous lift for those who are involved in agricultural R&D. And it speaks to the importance of making nutrition objectives absolutely in the center and outcomes absolutely in the center of the whole initiative. So what did we do on the research side? We basically overlay child stunting data with poverty data. And what we find out is that 4 geographies really pop out. And poverty and hunger, and this is sometimes counterintuitive, are concentrated in these bread baskets and rice bowls of the world. That's where the people are. That's where the poverty and hunger is. So we're not ignoring Latin America. We're not ignoring the Middle East. We have research programs in particular and policy programs that speak to those areas. We have focus countries in Central America. But the magnitude of the challenge in terms of both stunting and poverty is elsewhere, it's dwarfed by the situation in sub-Saharan Africa and in South Asia in terms of the sheer numbers of people involved. So then with these 4 geographies, which overlap to a very good degree our focus countries, and you can see in Africa we have the Ethiopian highlands, the eastern and southern Africa mixed maize-based systems, and the Sudano-Sahelian zone across West Africa. Across these, we had 3 major themes emerge. One was traditional agricultural research, advancing the productivity frontier, vaccines, breeding and genetics, genomics, the things that are really out there in terms of pushing that yield frontier. The second thing was the transforming key production systems. And that's this idea that if we're going to solve hunger and poverty, we've got to help smallholders in these major agricultural systems improve their livelihoods, their returns to land, labor, and capital. And the third is this nutrition and food safety. And soy, actually, I think, has a very key role to play in all 3 of those objectives. So at AID, then, we took those larger goals and thought about, well, what are where should we make our investments? So we have 3 long-term investment areas: climate resilient cereals, advanced research on pests and diseases of plants and animals, and this is where we can leverage, say, science from the Danforth Center in St. Louis into cassava to combat brown streak in Africa, even though we don't have cassava programs. The third is this idea of really investing in legume productivity. And legume productivity is important for many reasons. I think the biggest driver was the fact that legumes have such an important food quality aspect. But they also have very attractive aspects economically and, of course, environmentally. Then we had 3 cross-cutting areas: the Safe and Nutritious Foods program, again, reflecting back to, say, the legumes or possibly the livestock and the animal disease and that sort of thing. Policy and markets, institutional kinds of policy and market support, and analysis and research, and then the program for human and institutional capacity development. And I might mention that one of those programs is actually led by the University of Illinois. That's our modernizing Extension and Advisory Services, and I see Suzanne Poland, who's the manager of that program. So we have those, and then they all come together in something we call sustainable intensification. And this is the idea that you deal with the natural resource issues, you deal with the human capacity, the policy, the market issues, and you integrate your component technologies, and that's what gives you the underpinning for a transformation of the system. And if you think about it, soy is absolutely critical in legumes. It's critical in the quality food and nutrition outcome, and it's critical, in my view, in the sustainable intensification because of the role it plays in increasing the fertility of systems. So then we went on and set up a whole series of new partnerships with universities, some of them built on the existing CRISP portfolio, Many of them are new. We have 24 altogether now, Feed the Future Innovation Labs, and more than 60 universities are partnering. These are all competitively bid programs. They feature multiple models of engagement, and one of those models is the consortium model, which is used here in the Soybean Innovation Lab. It's also particularly noteworthy in the Nutrition Innovation Lab, which is led out of Tufts University, which is also a consortium. So now I'm going to sort of zero in a little more on soy. So why soy? Why now? And this is where we start to really lean on Dr. Goldsmith and Dr. Kablan sitting over there, and thanks to both of them. I think you can see, maybe you've seen this kind of data before. I think it's the fourth point that is really key for us today. And in particular, the fact that soy is an emerging crop in sub-Saharan Africa. And for my money, it's a very compelling element of a modernizing food system. It's right at the forefront of that. It's a new crop. It's a new crop in most of the world, of course, but it's a new crop in Africa. It is one of the ways that I think we can link rural production to emerging wealth in urban centers and in provincial centers. And I think this is the kind of thing that we're really excited to see to help look at agricultural transformation as part of a broader national growth strategy in our partner countries, and ultimately, very importantly, a source of jobs for the young people, some alternative to migrating to a city where the employment opportunities may be very limited. Now, the benefits of soybean are really manifold. I think the dietary transformation in terms of livestock and protein probably is our biggest driver. Having both this food and feed feature is a really unique aspect of soy, or at least among, I think, the legumes. The other thing that we see is, generally speaking, soy production is associated with positive outcomes in other aspects of livelihoods. And I think that's because of the value proposition of the crop. Low latitude systems are emerging, yet the research base to subtend those smallholder producers is still fairly weak. This is, IITA, Ken Daschle is here, which is a partner in this venture, has been working on this for years, but the other sources of investment in soy in countries like Africa have been, in areas like Africa, have been relatively few and far between. Also, of course, the environmental advantages associated with soy and biological nitrogen fixation are also very significant. So then the point of all this is, so this revolution is occurring. And I think for all of us, and maybe most of all for the lab, is how can smallholders participate in this emerging soy revolution? And you can see that right now we're starting at a very low base. I mean, sub-Saharan Africa without South Africa is 0.5% of global production. And yet we know that it has the potential to be transformative. So we want to figure out how to see this coming soy revolution in Africa be smallholder friendly, if not actually smallholder driven, which is something I spoke with Louise Sperling a couple weeks ago, and she wants it to be all about smallholders. I'll be happy if they have a role, but it'd be great to see them really emerge as key players. So of course the key driver is animal feed. And I should note that one of our other innovation labs, the Aquafish Lab, also works on soy-based fish feeds as an alternative to using fish meal. So it's very environmentally friendly, important, locally produced feeds. And we have a mission program in Nigeria, I believe, investing in that area. The emerging poultry and swine markets in sub-Saharan Africa, I think, will be the biggest driver. But we don't want to ignore food, of course, and that's one of the great benefits of working with our U.S. community, because we have a long history through, for example, programs like WISH and the National Soybean Research Lab that have been investing in how to make soy foods more and more available. And I keep hearing now that soy snack foods and such are emerging in countries around Africa, in West Africa, but also now in Malawi, and we hope to see that soon in Zambia and Mozambique as well. So in terms of the value chain approach, which matches our mission approach, you can see the 4 areas at the bottom that I think make for a solid program that is being emphasized by the lab. I would just point out that I think that the socioeconomic component is going to link all 4 of those areas, because you're going to have a feedback loop from post-harvest and utilization back to genetic improvement. And we can see here that they're talking about basically 3 areas in terms of production, improved household nutrition, and market linkages. And then an innovative approach through what's called the SMART, the Soybean Management with Appropriate Research and Technology platform. And this is part of, I think, the larger capacity building and impact promoting aspect of the program. Here's a quick overview of where the program is working. It's driven in large part by our missions that we're investing in soy, often around the poultry industry. So that was in Ghana, in Malawi, in Mozambique, and I think it's also, you're working in Zambia as well to some degree, Pete. So you can see we have that strong base, and then of course IITA is headquartered in Nigeria, so there really could be another point there in terms of the partnership that IITA is bringing. And just a quick overview of the breadth and depth of the program. It's brought in leading researchers from around the U.S. university community, the 3 main leads, Illinois, Missouri, and Mississippi State. And we're just delighted to see that kind of effort being brought together in an integrated single program to address the complex set of challenges that are facing soy. So this issue of smallholders. So I mentioned already the SMART, the collaboration with IITA. We're delighted to see this integration with CG programs. We see this across the innovation labs, but this one, it's hardwired, and we really appreciate that kind of mutually beneficial partnership that emerges. I think the innovative approach to building degree capacity amongst our African university partners is an exciting area. And also just the food-focused effort on low-processed soy, which could be very important for enhanced production and value addition of soy-based foods. So here's a little bit more on the gaps that are being filled, all through a collaborative research approach. We're working on BNF. Seed quality is a huge issue in Africa, huge bottleneck everywhere, but particularly in soy, where there's a lot of issues around seed viability, especially in a tropical climate. The whole animal feed value chain, I think, is going to emerge as a very important opportunity, both for African producers and for American producers. And I'll say just a little bit more about that. And there'll be a substantial, in addition to the socioeconomics I mentioned, a substantial knowledge management component through the portal that's flagged there at the bottom. So just very briefly, I wanted to flag 3 areas of benefit to the U.S. community. And I do this because some of you know that for many years, AID really didn't get near soybean. Maybe there's some bad feelings about Brazil. I can't judge whether they were justified or not, but there was a load. We had this period in the 80s when prices were very depressed, and yet what we saw in recent years was the American Soybean Association out there promoting soy utilization, but also starting to work in soy production as well in places like Afghanistan and elsewhere. And we had discussions with WISH and with the ASA, and we got the sense that people realized that fostering the market demand for soy had really been the transformative factor that put soybean prices up and established soy as the go-to food, feed, oil source crop for much of the world's food systems, and that happening in Africa was also going to benefit U.S. soy growers. We are science-based. U.S. Science, U.S. collaboration, I think, helps raise awareness of how modern science can be leveraged to address challenging problems facing smallholder farmers. And we have a lot of programs in plant biotechnology and in capacity development about science-based regulatory systems. I think the kinds of collaborations with U.S. Institutions like those involved in the Innovation Lab can only benefit better understanding and awareness of the potential of these new approaches. And finally, and very importantly, these U.S. industry standards being understood and hopefully accepted broadly that will, in the long run, make Africa an important market for U.S. soy and much better positioned to import whole beans, which is where our competitive advantage lies. So we really see this, just as we do many of our innovation labs, as a win-win proposition. So those are my thoughts. It's, again, it's very exciting to be here. Big thanks to Pete and the whole team, and Ahmed and Hailu and Vern on our side, but also all of the professors and researchers across the three lead universities and the African partners involved in IITA as well. So thanks very much, and back to you, Ahmed.
Thank you, Rob. We will have about 19 minutes for Q&A. We will have questions from the room and questions from online from the webinar. Start with the room. Questions?
Hi, I'm Karen Edwards with the American Soybean Association's World Initiative for Soy and Human Health. And my question is, thank you for your presentation today, and wondered if you could elaborate on the potential for knowledge sharing between the different innovation labs, and in particular connection with the nutrition work that Tufts is doing, because as you referenced, soy has a lot of nutritional benefits.
Right. Thank you, Karen. Yes, I'll tell you that nutrition lab is in hot demand. And by our missions, who, as you can imagine, are also very much grappling with how to make agricultural investments friendlier to nutrition outcomes. And we do have, we have a program emerging in Cambodia and Bangladesh, a couple of missions involved, as well as ourselves from the Bureau for Food Security, that links together the Innovation Lab, the Hort Lab, the IPM Lab, hopefully the Aquafish Lab, the World Fish, the Asian Vegetable Research and Development Center, and SIP, to look at horticulture and aquaculture within rice-based systems. And the Nutrition Lab is leading that effort, and it's really about figuring out how to make these technologies nutrition drivers and nutrition friendly. I know we can do a lot more than that. We do foster collaboration, communication across the labs. We just had a meeting of all the innovation labs in Washington last month. That involved many visits to the Hill as well, which were very exciting for the staff members that we met with. And that wasn't just in the foreign relations side. The Agriculture Committee was really excited about this too. So it's still early days, but we do want to foster collaborative approaches. And let me just ask if any of my colleagues want to take a stab at elaborating on this. Carol Levin, please, who is the force behind many of the Innovation Lab efforts.
I just wanted to say, during the September meeting that Rob referenced, a steering committee was formed of the 24 innovation labs to actually look at specific ways to increase collaboration between the innovation labs. So they're going to be looking at ways
so
to
that's an agenda item.
Yes.
Great.
Just on the knowledge sharing component, I also just wanted to mention that the Bureau for Food Security has a knowledge sharing mechanism called the Knowledge Driven Agricultural Development Mechanism, and the AgriLinks platform, which is doing a lot of work to help connect and foster knowledge sharing between the innovation labs and do some capture, like at this event, and try and bring in external partners to kind of get that information. So there's a lot of talk about it, but still a lot of progress to be made.
Thank you, Julie, and I will take this chance also to thank our AgriLink runner or KDAD team who are helping us in the technical support and they helped the organizing this workshop. Thank you. Question from webinar?
We do. We have one question from the webinar from Lloyd LePage, who is joining us from Iowa. We have about 50 people online and an active conversation going on in the chat pod. So this is a question for Rob. How are you, and by you I assume he means USAID, providing support to emerging African seed companies on foundation and breeder seed access to tropical soy? And I think specifically he means technical support.
Okay, it's an incredibly important area, and I would say it's a bottleneck, frankly, the issue of foundation seed. And I think Pete could answer this better than I, but the challenges in soy are among the most significant because of the need for high quality seed, the perishability in terms of germination viability and so forth. We are investing in this area, in part through our collaboration with AGRA, also through regional programs with our missions, but it's an area we need to do more in. We've just are beginning a collaboration with the World Bank and the Gates Foundation that looks at, again, how can we try to address this gap around foundation seed. So it's a work in progress, but let me ask if Ken or Pete or anybody who is better able to capture where this stands with respect to soy.
Yeah, I'd comment, but I think there's probably someone like Dennis or Randy, Brian, Dan. Do you have something you want to throw in on seeds? Throwing it back to me. Yeah, good. Yeah, this issue is important across a number of levels, certainly on the regulatory certification, the quality control, the whole seed system. And so the seed scaling issue is one that we're very much involved with and thinking about how to move seed, high quality seed that will germinate, known seed that you know what maturity zone, period, to performance, and so forth. And this is a very difficult task. Also, soy is a varietal, so it's can be saved. So private sector involvement is very necessary, but of interest or a challenge because of seed saving. So this is a big issue. Soy seed itself is delicate. It's a thin seed coat, so preserving seed over wintering is a challenge in low latitude tropical settings. So there are a number of issues somewhat unique to soy that we face, and hence a big mandate for the innovation lab and the research team at the lab.
Hi, University of Illinois Earl Kellogg. Really appreciate this overview, Rob. I think the Feed the Future and the strategy is excellent and good to see this fleshed out. One of the things I think we all realize is that the long-term sustainability of all of these is going to rest on human and institutional capacity development. And we got lots of breeders and lots of agricultural economists and lots of seed specialists, et cetera, et cetera. I'm wondering how not only the Soybean Innovation Lab, but how USAID is thinking about people who are much more expert in the question of human and institutional capacity development, collaborating with the more technical folks in these programs. I think it's really an important, we sometimes leave them out.
Yeah. That's a good observation, Earl, and I think we're partway there. We have in the Office of Agricultural Research and Policy, we have a Human and Institutional Capacity Development Group who are closely tied to the R&D investments. And what we see through our innovation labs is a whole array of investments, sometimes with the same institutions, in the same country, but we haven't figured out how to translate those, necessarily to be intentional about making the whole greater than the sum of the parts in terms of the institutional outcomes. We're thinking hard about this, and ultimately what I'd like to see is a strategy emerge that's going to require people of the type you mentioned, the people that really get the part about capacity development of institutions. And we have real leaders in this area in the office, but also outside in the community working with us, to put together a strategy that for a reasonable amount of investment really gets at some of the institutional issues. I don't think we're going back to the days 30 years ago when we had huge bilateral projects focused on institution building. We have a few, and I'm delighted we have those, one in Tanzania led by Ohio State, involving a number of other universities. But I think we are going to be able to look at investments like the Soy Innovation Lab and make the case to the mission in Ghana or Mozambique that, if we do this little add-on, we can really start to get at some of those more systemic issues, at least for that crop, and at least to build that sustainability. I also want to give big kudos to the lab for its innovative approach on capacity building through alliance with the university in Legon, elsewhere. Again, this is a new experiment, a new model of leveraging U.S. capacity to build the African capacity building capacity. So the jury's out. I think Susan, you've helped us think some of these things through, I know, Earl, but Susan Owens, Clara Cohen, Shauna Gillette, Karen Duca, we've got a great team thinking about this, and they are leveraging the thoughts of people across our bureau and in the innovation labs. But, we're open to ideas. We really want to get at that, especially in a way that our missions will join with us.
Yeah, Ken Dashiel, excuse me, IITA in Nigeria. Just to comment on the seeds and foundation seed, breeder seed. It is a huge challenge. There are some big successes in Africa with private seed companies such as Seedco, which is based in Zimbabwe. Excellent program for at least 45 years. And they have been historically mainly linked with large-scale farmers, but they're transitioning now and really putting a big effort to work with the small-scale farmers. Also, in West Africa, there's not so much of a history of private enterprise and seed companies, although that is changing quickly in Nigeria. In fact, there's over 100 seed companies there now. They have the same problem, and so in response to that, IITA has started what is called the Go Seed. It's basically a private seed company which focuses on breeder seed and foundation seed. So when the private company says we need breeder seed, historically we'd say, oh, no problem, here's 3 kilograms for you. Now we say, no problem, here's 1 ton for you. My comment then is a question. With one of the higher goals, one of the high goals of USAID being poverty alleviation, I'm wondering if you have any special emphasis on looking at youth and bringing youth out of poverty and giving them opportunities for jobs so that they don't get distracted by some of the negative influences we have around the world.
Yeah. Thanks for the comment, Ken, and also for the question. Yes, it's a priority for our administration, right up to the president. YALI is the Young African Leaders Initiative. We see a lot of discussion of the youth bulge. Many of the countries that we're working in have a very different population curve in terms of age, with a very large bulge at this young generation. So yes, we are, and the challenge, I think, is linking to that area of investment and endeavor. We need to do more thinking about that in terms of the employment generation piece. But soy, with all its value addition components, is probably one of the best places to be thinking about that.
Hey, Rob, thank you very much. I'm John Corbett from Aware. It's interesting that as I listened this morning, this incredible energy building around this term innovation and 24 innovation labs, and then this youth bulge, the population challenges. And it seems to me that there's just an element, you just said you need to continue to think about it. There's an element there in my observation, and then my question to you is, it seems like entrepreneurship is actually something that there's skills and knowledge and entrepreneurship all over, and the United States is particularly good at that, as you know. But it seems like, and I went to an Ag Innovation Showcase in St. Louis in September and was really struck by the phenomenal innovation coming in agriculture, and perhaps part of the solution to this challenge of moving this innovation into the African context would come from nurturing entrepreneurship, because it does need to be nurtured. Maybe some comments on that?
Yes, we have a slide we use that shows the strategy in Feed the Future for, we have research, policy and data analysis, education, extension, and we have entrepreneurship there. It's probably the area that our side, the R&D, policy, science side, invests the least in. We have another partner office in the Bureau, which is Markets, Partnership, and Innovation, and they do think more about that. But I absolutely agree, John, and part of what we're trying to do is make agriculture a good investment for on-farm, for smallholders, but also off-farm. So here's where you get to transparency in markets, reasonable trade regimes that allow trucks to move through borders without sitting for 3 days, all sorts of things along the way that are going to enhance the transparency and predictability of what a private investor is going to encounter if he or she decides to invest. The rub in our, for example, in the new alliance, which is under the G8 or now G7, is very much through partnerships with the private sector, and there's a bit of a quid pro quo here in terms of policy changes in the partner countries. There's a great desire to have all levels of companies participate in that. So while we have DuPont, Pioneer, and we have perhaps Unilever and others, I don't know them all, we're also looking for smaller companies in the countries in which we're working, or regionally based companies, and I think we're having some success there, but I know that it's an area where we'd love to see more happen. We'd love, and maybe, as you suggest, thinking about how to leverage the knowledge and skills of our agricultural entrepreneurial community and our food systems community, broadly speaking, would be something we could think about. It's certainly, we do agree with you, it's an issue.
So Craig Gunderson from University of Illinois, and I wanted to briefly come back to Karen's comment about the Nutrition Innovation Lab. We at the Soybean Innovation Lab are collaborating, and plans to collaborate in several ways with this Nutrition Innovation Lab. Pete and I both have been to Boston to meet with the people there at Tufts. One particular area is they have a soy-based weaning food that they're testing out in, I believe, Uganda and then in Ghana, and we're talking about working with them along those lines. So we see these innovation labs as an exciting way to collaborate across different dimensions.
Great, that's great to know.
One last question.
Somebody online maybe, huh?
On the line.
So we have a question from James Hershey in Kansas City, Missouri. He works with the American Soybean Association's WISH program. And Rob, he was asking pragmatically, how do implementing partners connect the dots in this whole of government approach, specifically connecting Soy Innovation Lab to programs such as McGovern-Dole and Food for Progress?
Oh, well, I'm thinking that Jim might be able to answer that better than I. He's probably got more ideas than I do. But I think it's just the kind of thing we'd like. Let's say, take soy. Take groundnut, for example, and this whole issue of ready-to-use therapeutic foods. That's an area where we have done work over time to try to connect what we're doing on the food innovation side of groundnuts, where, again, quality control is very important. Think of aflatoxin in particular, but also the potential benefits for because of the dense nutrient content of groundnut. Another case in point is where we have done some work in Ethiopia on chickpea. And the idea there was to develop smallholder linkages to chickpea markets, both for snack foods, nutritious snack foods, I should add, but also to World Food Program purchases and again, preparation of RUTFs for people in serious undernutrition circumstances. I think it'd be great if we could somehow figure out how to make that connection. You know, and again, I'm getting into areas I don't really know the bigger piece of, but if you think about some aspects of food aid reform and the interest in local purchase, if there was a way to also connect some aspects of the Soy Innovation Lab, either through processing and local value addition or through integrating, you know, the knowledge around post-harvest handling and moving product to preparation and provision of soy-based foods in school feeding programs, I think it'd be very exciting. But I bet there's others in the room who either have more insight on this or else we could look to partners in our Food for Peace Bureau and also in colleagues with USDA to comment on that, Jim. But, you know, thanks for that question. And several of the questions that you've heard this morning are really things that, going forward, there's probably a lot of potential to really plumb them.
Thank you, Rob.
My pleasure.